Hey guys, I'm back and I'm feeling much better this week, although as you can tell, my voice is still not back to normal. So bear with me, please. I'm going to try and speak as clearly as possible, and I'm hoping by next week my voice will be back to normal and I won't sound like this. But Lexi did a great job last week solo and introduced you to the Lindsay Clancy case. Today, we're going to talk more in depth about that case, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents. But before we do, there also has been a few new details in the Idaho College Student Murder case that just recently came out. So we want to talk about that new information first. So let's get into it.
Okay, so a few updates on the Idaho College Student Murder case. The search warrant from Pennsylvania is supposed to be unsealed after 60 days, which would be February 27th. If you remember, Bryan Kohberger is from Pennsylvania. That's where his parents' home was, and that's also where he drove a few weeks after the murders had occurred. The search warrant should include what they found in his parents' home, because obviously we know that they did search the home, and maybe Bryan had a room there. They searched that. And we're hoping maybe Bryan's car would be involved in that too, because we do know the car was found at the residence. So I'm wondering if that is kind of grouped into the search warrant for the house. But I'm not really sure how it's going to work, since we know there's a gag order, but that's in place in Idaho. So I don't know if that transfers over to Pennsylvania or how much Pennsylvania can release. But I guess we're going to find out in the next few days.
Yeah, I'm super interested to know what they found in his car, if there's any blood or anything, from their house.
Even like hairs of one of them.
You would think there'd have to be something.
Yeah, even if he went in and cleaned, they say that you can still, just because you can't see the blood doesn't mean that it's not actually there. So there's gotta be like a speck of something that he left, or something he missed. Okay, so another thing that came out, News Nation reported that it was actually Ethan Chapin's best friend that found Xana and Ethan. It's believed he had gone over to the King Road residence that same morning, November 13th, and he saw the bodies, checked for a pulse, and then yelled to Dylan, who was one of the surviving roommates, and told her to call 911. So the call came from Dylan's phone, but it was actually Ethan's best friend who spoke with police. And it's being said that Dylan had called the friend over because she had been scared by what she heard the previous night, and that's why he was the one that found the bodies. It's not really totally clear how that happened. I at first wondered if maybe he was just coming over to hang out, or if he had plans with Ethan or something like that, but it sounds like Dylan, in fact, did call him to check things out, since when she tried to call her roommates, the ones that had passed away, nobody was answering. None of them answered the phone. It was also reported that on the night of the murders, Dylan yelled out of her bedroom door to quiet down when she heard noises and screaming, and at one point she even opened her door again, and she saw the suspected killer, Bryan Kohberger.
And we knew this from the affidavit. Right. They said this in the affidavit.
Yeah, they said that she had even come almost face to face with him, that she had even saw him enough to give a description of bushy eyebrows and that he was a white male. Mm-hmm. So she definitely did see him. She said that she saw him. But the difference with this report, and I find this super interesting, is that it says that she assumed it was a party goer. So she just closed her door, and after the crying and screaming had stopped, she tried to call the roommates but got no answer. So I think for me that was weird, because going back to the affidavit, it stated that Dylan said when she saw Bryan, she was in a, quote, frozen shock phase. So it's confusing because I feel like they kind of contradict each other. Because
how scared were you if you thought it was a party goer?
And if you thought it was a party goer, why did you freeze and be in shock when you saw somebody? So I definitely find that interesting. I also find it a little confusing how she heard crying and screaming. We know that from the affidavit. How she thought or connected that it was a party goer, or how she thought that it was a party going on. I would assume that she would have heard terrifying, scared screams and cries. I don't know how she thought that was just somebody partying or something was going on.
The only thing I could think of is that she tried to talk herself out of it in a way,
almost tried to convince herself she was being crazy.
I'm sure murder was the last thing on her mind,
of course.
So I'm thinking maybe she saw him, he gave her the creeps, she was a little scared, but then went back in her room, convinced herself he has to just be like a party goer.
Yeah, and then the next morning when her friends still weren't answering, maybe that's when she really started to get concerned, because obviously she's calling all 4 of them and none of them are picking up. And that's maybe when she called Ethan's friend. So,
right. And
it could make sense.
Yeah, the next morning when they still weren't answering, she was like, okay, I'm a little freaked out. Maybe what I heard was something bad, and she wanted somebody to come check it out. I get that. So that, to me, makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I'm hoping we figure that out whenever we hear more, probably at the next court date. I'm hoping she's able to, because we have yet to hear from Dylan, so I'm hoping that she'll speak at court, or a statement from her will come out or something like that, because there's a ton of confusion around the Dylan story.
Right, there is. And I think we're not going to know much more until we hear it from her herself.
Yes.
She needs to kind of speak on what she was feeling and why she did the things she did or didn't act, and call 911 right away. Everybody wants to know that.
Right, and I'm sure she has a reason. I'm sure if we heard it from her, it would make all the sense. She knows why she did what she did and how she felt. So
Exactly. So we'll just have to wait to hear more on that.
So one other thing that came out, News Nation also reported that Kaylee and Madison were killed first, followed by Ethan and Xana, which is kind of what we thought had happened. We had always believed that Ethan and Xana were probably not the targets. I know, Ash, me and you always believed that it was the girls upstairs, and that maybe they were just, sadly collateral damage, or they, Brian didn't expect them to be there, something like that.
Yeah, like maybe Ethan had come out to see what was going on and walked right into Brian.
When he was walking, down to leave or something. We don't know that yet, but supposedly Ethan was found in the doorway of Xana's room and his throat was cut, and then Xana was believed to be killed last, and she put up a heck of a fight. We've known from the start that she had defensive wounds. We know now that she had deep cuts on her hands and fingers from trying to grab the knife, which is so sad to me because, one, we know now that she probably watched Ethan's death. She maybe even tried to fight him off of Ethan to save Ethan. And then she knew what was coming and she fought for her life, grabbing the knife. And maybe at one point she got the knife or thought she grabbed it and she grabbed the blade and she just wasn't strong enough to get him off of her. So that's just terrifying.
So sad. And
I think it's interesting that Ethan was killed differently. So I wonder what the story on that is, because, I think it could go multiple ways. I don't think Ethan was the target, but seeing another male, did that make Brian angry and it was like out of rage he cut his throat? Or was it just like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect you to be here, so I need to do it quickly?
He walked into Brian being the suspected killer.
Yes.
Hasn't been proven guilty yet.
Yes.
If he walked into the killer and the killer just shut him up really quick. And
or didn't expect him there, scared him, and just slashed his throat really quick. But I do think that's interesting, and I'm hoping we'll get to hear more on that. But I'm worried that because Brian hasn't taken a plea yet, so I'm worried if Brian pleads not guilty, we're never really going to figure out what happened with Ethan, because obviously that would have to be something that comes from Brian. He's the only one who knows what the reason Ethan was killed differently for was, or what happened. So these are just some of the things that we will know hopefully when the preliminary hearing is. And again, that's set for June 26th, so we still have quite some time until we get there. But of course, we'll always keep you updated with any new information that comes out, including the Pennsylvania search warrant that we're hoping comes out. But again, with the gag order in place, we're not sure how that's going to come about or what information, if any, we're going to get. But with that being said, we probably won't hear a lot until the preliminary hearing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on, let's go back to the Lindsay Clancy case. This case truly breaks my heart. I will never understand how a mother can hurt her babies, but I also was fortunate enough to never experience postpartum depression or psychosis, and I know those things are extremely serious and scary and can really change you and make you feel almost like a shell of yourself. So I do have sympathy for Lindsay. She was clearly struggling and she tried to get the help, and unfortunately, the help that she received did her more harm than good. I think in a lot of these cases where mothers are coming in and needing help, some doctors are just so quick to prescribe medication, a lot of different pills, and I don't think that's always the best solution.
Yeah, I think we see this a lot with the mental health crisis in America. I think a lot of times somebody goes in, mothers go in, anybody goes in asking for help, and immediately off the bat, they're throwing pills at them, which I'm not saying that's always a bad thing, but I think that there's other things that you can do, and sometimes putting somebody on a million different medications isn't the best answer. And not to mention, with her hormones being everywhere already, being postpartum, you never know how those things are going to mix. So I feel like it can be so dangerous, and so you don't know. And she's not going to know what to do because she doesn't understand why she's feeling the way she is. So I think it's a dangerous game when it comes to that. And I think sometimes medication can do more bad than it can do good.
Right, especially if you're over-medicating.
Yes.
I'm a mom to 4 kids, and I had my last baby 10 months ago. So my baby and Lindsay's baby were very close in age. I know how hard it is, especially having other kids to tend to while simultaneously trying to bond with your new baby. You feel pulled in so many different directions, and you're exhausted. And I actually remember after I had my 3rd baby, I had a bit of a hard time adjusting to this new baby, and I did have a little bit of postpartum anxiety. So my doctor ended up giving me medication for that. But after 2 months, just 2 months of being on it, I felt numb and just kind of out of it all the time. Yeah. You just don't feel like yourself. And I hated it so much that I was like, okay, I'm just getting off. I can't do this anymore. I remember telling my husband, I said, I'm done. I'm not doing it. I don't like it.
And that was one medication.
That's what I'm saying. And luckily, like, my anxiety was manageable and I didn't need it. So I got off of it. But just that one medication, and I was feeling that way. Yeah. Lindsay was prescribed tons of different medications. I think they said like 12. She was prescribed a lot in those months.
Yeah, and the things that she was prescribed were also for cases that were more severe. They were harder medications than obviously the one that you were taking. So if the one that you were taking was affecting you like that, I can't imagine how these were affecting her.
Like I said, I don't think throwing different pills at mothers when they need help is always the solution. I want to say I'm not against being on medicine, but I think mothers ultimately just need better care and more help after having babies from the beginning. Here in the U.S., after a mother has a baby, and this is assuming all goes well and it's not a C-section birth, she goes home after about 2 days. And I remember wanting to get back home, but also being scared, like, okay, this is it, no more nurses, I'm on my own after 2 days. And also my husband went back to work just after a few days. So I really was on my own. Most men here maybe get like a week or 2 weeks off and that's it. And a lot of times they're using their sick days or vacation days because it's not paid time off. It's kind of a joke. The amount of pressure that's put on moms to handle everything just a few days after birth, with little to no help or sleep, is ridiculous, especially if she's got other kids to also care for, because it's not like you can just sleep when the baby sleeps, as they say. When you have other kids to care for, you have to take care of them too. So you really aren't getting, much help, and you're not getting much sleep, and that really could take a toll on you. So I think there just needs to be more resources and more support for moms from the get-go, and then maybe that would help moms feel better and not so overwhelmed, which in turn would hopefully decrease the amount of these types of situations. This case reminds me a lot of the Andrea Yates case that happened in 2001. Lexi, I don't know if you know of this case.
Just a little bit. I know, like, briefly. It's a hard one.
Yes, it's horrible. She was a mother also struggling with postpartum issues, and she ended up drowning her 5 kids while her husband was away. And I actually have a hard time reading all the horrific details of that case. If you look her up, Andrea Yates, you guys can go and read all about it. It's horrific, those poor babies. I was literally crying reading about it. But Andrea had been struggling for quite some time as well, and to this day, she remains in a mental hospital. But her husband actually just recently spoke out about Lindsay's case in support of Lindsay. He believes postpartum psychosis. I also want to just say that Lindsay was not officially diagnosed with postpartum psychosis. I think this is just what her defense team is assuming what happened.
Yeah, I think they're more so kind of saying this might have been an issue she struggled with but undiagnosed, or this is something that she had but didn't know.
Right. But Andrea Yates, she did have postpartum psychosis, and he believes that it is a true sickness and she should not be punished for something that she couldn't help. He truly feels like she wasn't in her right mind, and like his wife, she was hearing things, seeing things, and hallucinating. And she never would have had this had she not been mentally ill. So besides him, there's also been a ton of other people speaking out in support of Lindsay. She's got friends and family and, people that knew her saying what a great person she is, what a great mom she was, and she would never have done this had she been in her right mind. And also her husband wrote something beautiful. He put out a statement, and it was a very long statement. You can go read it, but it was beautiful. He wrote in it about his babies. He described each child and how amazing they were and his relationship with them. And he talked about how he and Lindsay met and how he loved being a husband to her and a father to his kids. He also wrote about how Lindsay had been struggling, but then he wrote how he forgives his wife and he hopes that others can find it in their hearts to forgive her too. And I just feel like, what a strong man. I can't imagine the pain that he's going through right now.
Yeah, he really just had everything ripped away from him.
Right. He lost everything, and he's still willing to just so quickly forgive.
Right.
So that tells a lot about him. And as Lexi talked about last week, she went over the details. Lindsay was in court a few weeks ago, so I won't get into that again. But she pled not guilty to her charges. But the next court date, I believe, is May 2nd. So we will be tuning into that, and we will update you guys as we get more information. But this is just an all-around sad case.
So that's all we have for you guys today. We will, as always, be closely following both of these cases and keep you guys updated. But with that being said, thank you for listening. Stay safe and have a great weekend.